Hello, everyone, and welcome back to yet another edition of the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you, as always, by the GSMC Sports Network. My name is Christopher Shepard. Thank you guys yet again for tuning in. Today, we should have another great show. Unfortunately, it is the bittersweet ending of the hockey season, as we will be recapping the Panthers' Game 7 win. We will not have that many more hockey segments coming up in the next couple of weeks, but we are transitioning into the football season. So after we recap the Panthers Game 7 win and also look at the 2024-25 way too early Stanley Cup champion betting odds, we are going to delve even more deeply into my player profile series. We're going to be looking at even more exciting, dynamic quarterbacks that you should roster for your fantasy team, including one of the most consistent fantasy quarterbacks of all time, and also one of the most controversial fantasy quarterbacks of all time. So it should be a very, very exhilarating show. Let's just get right into it. But before we do just that, I do want to remind you to like, follow, and subscribe to the show. It is a huge support to both me, my fellow podcasters, and the network. Another way you can support all of us is by leaving a tip or donation at the link, gsmc.cloud right there. That is also a huge support, another way to support the network and me and my fellow podcasters. So if you do ever feel so inclined, please consider it. It's appreciated. Also, question or about any of the segments at the beginning of next episode. Without further ado, let's jump into a very, very good job. And we'll start off with the events last night. Your Panthers are the 2024 NHL champions, winning 2-1 last night, the Edmonton Oilers. In a game that really saw the Panthers in many different ways, in many different varieties, get back what they did best, limiting the high danger scoring chance that Edmonton produced, and just overall playing the sound game. So, without further ado, if you're still playing daily fantasy hockey and you care to know who are the stars of that game last night, here they are for you. Carter Verhaeghe. I said that he had to step up, and he stepped up in spades, scored the first goal. This period kind of set the tone for how the game was going to go. 1 goal, 1 assist last night, 2 plus minus for 9.5 fantasy points for him. Another player who I've been singing his praises all postseason long, Sam Reinhart, with a goal. The game-winning goal, it turns out, 1 plus minus and 6.5 fantasy points. And last but not least, a guy who I said needed to have a stellar game in net for the Florida Panthers to have any chance of winning this game, and he lived up to that expectation. Sergei Bobrovsky, .958 save percentage last night for 6.6 fantasy points. So overall, the Florida Panthers stars and key role players stepped up when they needed him. Carter Verhaeghe, more than anyone, a guy who has been there, done that, won the Stanley Cup, producing for the Florida Panthers now, and ultimately a well-deserved Florida Panthers win. On the Edmonton Oilers side of things, I guess the only player worth mentioning is the goal scorer, with Matthias Janmark getting that breakaway goal only like 2 minutes after Carter Verhaeghe opened the scoring. With that 1 goal, he ends up with only 4.5 fantasy points on 1 plus minus. So overall, as you can see, the Edmonton Oilers did not necessarily live up to their ferocious comeback. In terms of what happened in this game, I can't really say what certain attributes of the game made Florida come out victorious. I'm really struggling to find the ways to describe how Florida won this game, because it was a very going through the motions like game, especially for the Edmonton Oilers. I'm not saying the Edmonton Oilers didn't play well. There were certain periods and moments where Edmonton seemed to be controlling the game. They seemed to be getting back to what they did best, especially on the power play. But ultimately, it did seem a little bit caricaturish. It did seem to be like, okay, we're just going to go through what we have done to get to this point, and hopefully Florida is not going to be as energized as they not been in these past 3 games, and that was not the case. Florida really keyed in defensively, and also it ended up coming down to the bounces of the puck. If you see Florida's goals, one is very well incredibly worked. It's what their forte is for getting these kind of goals. You go behind the net, you have someone behind the net, center the puck back into the offensive zone, get a pass on goal or a shot on goal, and hopefully someone is there to tap it in. That's what happened. You saw the guy behind the net pass it out to Rodriguez. Rodriguez got on a net, and Verhaeghe was there to tap it in. And then the second goal was just a weird kind of defensive breakdown for Edmonton, where you have a really, really good chance at the other end of the ice, and it's hovering around Bobrovsky's kind of crease there, and then the Panthers are able to clear it. Sam Reinhart's skating free, and he just gets a shot off. You can say that perhaps Skinner should have saved that shot, but it is what it is, and Sam Reinhart ends up getting that game-winning goal in the end. On the Edmonton side of things, I really think that they just didn't get lucky, right? The way they got back into this game not only was because of their power play and penalty kill, their 2 huge facets of success in the playoffs. It was because they were getting one-on-one opportunities with Bobrovsky that not a lot of teams get. And as we saw last night on the breakaway goal of Matthias Janmark, the Oilers did a fantastic job of getting those pucks up the middle of the neutral zone and into their offensive zone very well for those breakaway kind of opportunities. Last night, the Florida Panthers did so well clogging all those areas, shutting down ways that Edmonton could get passes through to their key players, the little outlet passes that they usually have. They did that very well. If you saw the Edmonton power plays last night, every single player touched the puck on the power play. Because Florida was so keyed into shutting off the passes into the net, the passes back to Bouchard, the way Bouchard got the puck on net, they were just able to limit how Edmonton could score goals, especially limiting their amount of turnovers high up their end of the zone, and being very aggressive in getting to their forecheck early and often. And so that's the reason why Florida won the Stanley Cup, I think. They just proved that when the going gets rough, they get going, and they got off to a fantastic start. So, in terms of the Conn Smythe Trophy, I do think that Connor McDavid well-deserved, and I actually do not think this Game 7 loss taints his legacy. I think that ultimately, when we look through the lens to after Connor McDavid's career, when he's retired, he's hung up his boots, and he's going to the Hall of Fame, I don't think, win or lose any Stanley Cup, whether he gets back there in the future, Connor McDavid, when it's all said and done, is going to be revered by so many in the league just for what he represents. His skill set is one of the best in the league, one of the best we've ever seen, and I don't think it's going to be any different. And I truly believe that even though it sucks that he could not win it with the Oilers, I think this Conn Smythe Trophy for such a fantastic postseason to even get to this point really elevates his status as one of the best players in the league and in the history of the league, rather than diminish it. I don't think that, him having kind of a subpar Game 7 and Game 6 will even taint his legacy either way. A lot of players, when they lose the Stanley Cup, but still have phenomenal postseasons, are still revered. It happened with Reggie Leach because he had a phenomenal conference semifinals to get to that point. I think that Connor McDavid doesn't necessarily need a cup to win, but he definitely needs a certain amount of longevity in playoff runs that others might not need, because the Edmonton Oilers championship window, like it or not, no matter how open it seems, is going to rapidly close. Not only are the Avs the Golden Knights, the Stars. We'll talk about them later if we get to the Stanley Cup odds for next season segment of the show. And there are younger teams like the Canucks. They played and took them a little while to break down. And other teams out in the West, maybe even the Kraken, get back to what they did in their first year, getting to the playoffs as the first year of their expansion team. So I feel like the defining moment of the McDavid-Draisaitl era was not last night. It's going to be next season, because of the fact that they're going to have to wipe this Game 7 from their memories. Forget the fact that they got to that comeback. Look themselves in the mirror, look inwards, and figure out how to get back at it again, because no one's going to lay to rest for them. No one is going to play dead for them. This is the Western Conference of the NHL, one of the toughest conferences in all of sports to get through right now. The fact that Edmonton did break through is very encouraging, but there are very few opportunities for them to break through again, especially as more and more young teams get better. Who knows? The playoff landscape is going to be very, very volatile and very, very intriguing to see next season. So Edmonton better hope that they can sustain this level till next season, because there are many teams coming in this league that Edmonton should be scared of. But congratulations yet again to the Florida Panthers. I do believe they were the better team, even though for 3 games they definitely did not look like it. But for Game 7, they got back to what they did best. And a team lifted the trophy last night. A team forgot what happened before and won Game 7. And a team definitely deserves their first franchise Stanley Cup. Congratulations to the Florida Panthers on such a fantastic NHL season. And with that, that will just about end this segment. And unfortunately, all of these postseason segments for hockey. We bid adieu to the hockey season. Coming up next, we are going to be doing our first player profile of this edition of the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast with one of the most consistent fantasy QBs. And if you want to find out who it is, come back right after the break. It should be a can't-miss segment.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Hello everyone and welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. I hope you guys enjoyed what should be the last segment of the hockey season. However, we do have one coming up later in the show to look ahead to the 24-25 NHL season. But for now, we are transitioning from the rinks to the gridiron, where I'll be continuing my player profile series with a guy who has been one of the most exhilarating fantasy players to watch over the years. Perhaps the most dominant as well over the past 4 years, considering where he ranks position-wise in terms of fantasy. So without further ado, let's jump right into our first player profile of the day. And that player is Josh Allen. Josh Allen, like I said, is nothing short of consistent. if we go over the past 4 years of Josh Allen's career and look at the fantasy implications he offers at the position where he finished, it reads QB1, QB1, QB2, QB1. In no season over the past 4 years has Joshua Allen finished outside the top 2. You can talk about the turnovers all you want. You can talk about the risks Josh Allen takes with his body. You can talk about how so many different OCs in Buffalo have walked him out the door. He lost his best OC in Brian Dable. Ken Dorsey's kind of diminishing what he does in this offense, limiting his verticality down the field. But no matter what, Josh Allen, no matter who he has at his disposal, no matter who is talking in his ear telling him the plays, nothing short of one of the best fantasy QBs we've ever seen. Throughout his career, he's accumulated 2,082 fantasy points. His best season was actually in 2021, so kind of the start of that 4-year stretch right there when he had 349.7 fantasy points. He's had 4,000 yards in each of the past 4 seasons, so that's a huge factor as to why he has been in that top 2 range for QBs in the fantasy world. Projections for next year for him, he's going to continue that, they say. 4,385 yards, 34 touchdown passes through the air for a total of 402.58. So they are saying that Josh Allen is not stopping. And if you care to know, he's also one of the best dual threat quarterbacks. As we can see, his aggressive style of running certainly helps many people get more fantasy points from him. 546 yards projected next year for 9 touchdowns rushing for a quarterback. That's actually over the last 5 years. And so, here's the thing about Josh Allen. This year perhaps might be the toughest year of his career. Gone out the door is Stephon Diggs. Gone out the door is Gabe Davis. We are looking at one of the more thin wide receiver rooms that Josh Allen has ever had. You have an amalgamation of Khalil Shakir, a third-year guy who has shown some signs of brightness in his short NFL career. You have a guy in Curtis Samuel who hasn't really been a prominent wide receiver since he was a Carolina Panther and had a breakout season in 2020. And then you draft a guy in Keon Coleman who I'm really, really high on, but is still a rookie and still is very unproven. So we have to see how he pans out. So there are certainly worries about Josh Allen, especially considering the fact that he is still turnover prone. That's the caveat with him. That's the extra baggage that comes with drafting a guy like Josh Allen. He's going to put up a lot of yards, but just know that there is always a risk that Josh Allen's going to turn the ball over any given week. That's the barrier between people calling him a successful quarterback and a Super Bowl winning quarterback. But that's no matter here. We are looking at Josh Allen in terms of the regular season. We're looking at him in terms of a fantasy season. And right now, Josh Allen is showing no signs of saying that even without his top 2 receivers, that he's showing any signs of slowing down. And the reason why I'm saying this is because I'm very, very high on Keon Coleman. He brings a certain player profile to the Buffalo Bills that can really help Joshua Allen grow and really maintain that level of consistency that we've seen, because of the fact he's not only known as a route runner, but he's known for catching a lot of contested catches, making a lot of contested catches, especially over the middle of the field where a quarterback is more prone to turn the ball over. And so, what with Josh Allen having so many problems keeping the turnover number low, picking up a guy like Keon Coleman could be the difference between a 1 interception game and a 2 interception or even 3 interception game, because of the fact that when you have Keon Coleman over the middle of the field, the route concepts open up a lot more. You are getting a guy who Josh Allen can say, I'm comfortable throwing to in the short to intermediate areas of the field without having any risk of me turning the ball over because of the fact he has strong hands, good body control, and I know that with my talent and arm strength at the QB position, I can get it to him. And so that's the main question mark. Can Josh Allen develop that rapport with Keon Coleman to ensure that he has a safe option in the middle of the field for when things don't pan out? In terms of how Josh Allen could be seen as not as efficient next year, in terms of him finishing below the QB 1 to 3 range, there are questions about how the Bills' offense is going to look. As we saw, they switched a lot of offensive coordinators last year. They switched from Ken Dorsey, So there has to maintain a level of consistency, not only to Josh Allen, but to the Bills' offense as a whole. I think that they're ultimately going to have to establish who is the number one receiver, who Josh Allen is going to be looking to on deep routes to get the ball vertical, because you lose a guy in Stephon Diggs who's willing to do that. And so you have to establish that. Also last year, we saw the Bills, in order to even get to the playoffs, when they looked like they might be down and out, and they had to go on this incredible run of their last couple of games to even get to that position, we saw them use a lot more screen action with guys like James Cook out of the backfield. Now, in terms of how that affects Josh Allen, it ultimately depends on how many yards James Cook gets out of those screen action plays. But it certainly calls to mind an offensive switch. The Bills certainly employed a lot of post routes, a lot of go routes to kind of showcase Josh Allen's arm strength and showcase his talents again in the ball to deeper areas of the field. Now I kind of feel like they're going to have to get more varied in how they do that, because there is no deep threat, or for that matter intermediate threat right now that I can say will step up for the Buffalo Bills. It could be Keon Coleman, but I don't know. I haven't seen him at the NFL level to confidently say that he will be a go-to target. So I really think that the job of not only Josh Allen but the Bills OC going into the season is finding varied ways to showcase Josh Allen's talent. And if they do, I think Josh Allen will be A-okay, and he's definitely going to be another contender for a QB1 season. However, if there is any signs of, similar to what Patrick Mahomes went through last year, which I'll talk about in a couple segments from now, if there's any signs of inconsistency with how Josh Allen breaks in these receivers, that's where I get a little worried, because if Josh Allen doesn't have a deep ball threat, there goes his most valuable asset as a fantasy option, mainly due to the fact he gets many big yards by pushing the ball down the field. If that's taken away from him, then who knows, he could fall down a little bit. But for now, I'm saying that Josh Allen is the number one QB in fantasy at the moment, and I don't think that's going to change. But with that, that should just about end this edition of my player profile series. There's going to be a couple more segments for today's show, but coming up next, we are switching back to hockey yet again. Now that this season is over, let's look ahead early to next season, shall we? Well, I'll be going over the early Stanley Cup Finals betting odds for next season. You do not want to miss that segment. We'll be right back on the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GS.
And welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to us always by the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast. I hope you liked the player profile of Josh Allen. He definitely is going to be a contender for that QB1 spot, so hopefully you guys get him early in your fantasy draft if you can. But we're switching back from football to hockey for one last segment, commemorating the hockey season. Now that the Panthers have lifted the Stanley Cup, what is going to happen in the next season of the NHL, 2024 to 2025? Who will be the favorites for the Stanley Cup next season? So without further ado, let's get right into the betting odds, the way too early ones for that matter, for the Stanley Cup Finals for next season. Now, as always, you're going to have a lot of different teams around this playoff spectrum circle that definitely are going to be ones to watch as the season goes on. But the number one position should not surprise you. It is the Florida Panthers. However, an interesting fact to know is that they have the longest odds of any preseason favorite coming off of a Stanley Cup championship in a long while. That's mainly due to the fact that they have 11 unrestricted free agents. And most of them, while not necessarily integral assets to what the Florida Panthers did this year, there is a couple in particular who I'm really not necessarily worried about, but still very, very intrigued to see how they handle these different players' contract situations. You have a guy in Sam Reinhart who's going to become a UFA. And from what I've said about him on this show, and from what you guys have seen, Sam Reinhart is incredibly important. Without that goal last night, without that breakaway opportunity, the Panthers don't win the Cup. And they might not be as high up on this list as they are right now. And so, for the Florida Panthers, it is all about being able to maintain that structure. If you lose a couple of those unrestricted free agents, guys who you're not necessarily looking to use or retain, that's fine. But you have to retain the big guns. You can't let a guy like Sam Reinhart walk unrestricted from your team because of the fact that you need that core. Sam Reinhart, Alexander Barkov, Matthew Tkachuk, and Carter Verhaeghe are all players that if you're the Florida Panthers, you cannot let go because of the fact you built that core. GM Bill Zito worked hard to create that infrastructure in the Florida Panthers squad to be able to lift their first ever Stanley Cup. And that hard work should not go to waste. But for now, the Florida Panthers are the ones to beat in the NHL for next season. Looking at some other teams on this list, we have three very intriguing teams in the Hurricanes, Colorado Avalanche, and the Stars, all in this plus 950 to plus 1,000 range, who also have some questions, but actually a little bit less than the Panthers because of the fact their unrestricted free agents or free agents are not as integral to their teams as the Panthers. So let's look at the Hurricanes for a second. They certainly have guys like Toivo Teravainen, who's an unrestricted free agent, Brent Pesca, who's an unrestricted free agent, Brady Shea, who certainly can make some noise, but they're not top-line guys. I'm talking about the guys like Sebastian Aho, you know? I think in terms of the Carolina Hurricanes, the disappointing thing with them is that they always get to these nice little points in the postseason where you consider them to be the heavy cup favorite, and then all of a sudden, they lose that. And I think that the key for the Hurricanes is not, stripping this team down. It's building it up because they definitely have one of the best cores in all of the NHL. And you look at them from top to bottom, but they just need that extra depth to get them over the line. I don't know how they're going to find it. I think that they certainly might have to look for either a goalie or some defensemen to shore up their defensive shortcomings in the postseason. But right now, the Hurricanes are looking at a time where their championship window is now. And much like the Edmonton Oilers, it could diminish in any second. It could diminish in a snap. And so the Carolina Hurricanes look for them to be very busy in the offseason in terms of deciphering what they want to do with this roster. Then you have the Colorado Avalanche, who, when they're healthy, when they're fully fit, are probably the best team in the Western Conference and in the NHL. It kind of shocked me that they didn't get to at least the Western Conference Finals this year because of the fact they already have the core, they already have the cup that was won by this core of players. And looking at the depth they just have from the first line to the third line, it's guys like McKinnon, it's guys like McCarr, it's guys like Ranton, it's guys like Landeskog. They just have such solid depth and solid experience. They know what it takes to win a cup. And when you're looking at how long these odds are to start off, I think the Colorado Avalanche might be the bet to win the Stanley Cup next year. Obviously, in the past, they've had a couple injuries that have derailed their seasons. But as we saw in 2022, this team can catch fire, man. They just have such incredible talents. And I just think the sky's the limit for them. Then we look at a Stars team that I really think could have made it to the Stanley Cup final. I think they legitimately were Roope Hintz away from beating the Edmonton Oilers. If Roope Hintz were healthy for the entirety of the series, the Dallas Stars could have been the Stanley Cup Finals and could have pushed the Florida Panthers as much as the Edmonton Oilers did. In terms of the Dallas Stars, it's figuring out how to meld that youth and experience in the squad. I think that the Dallas Stars... Oops, sorry about that. I think that the Dallas Stars are a team who have the experienced players that you need to get to the Stanley Cup Finals and beyond, but they also have youthful players that they're really excited about. Guys like Jason Robertson, guys like Wyatt Johnston, guys like Thomas Harley, who's also an unrestricted free agent. And so, I think the Dallas Stars need to find a way to transition to that youth, but still make sure that they have key leaders in their locker room to hold them together. Because right now, the Dallas Stars are in a weird place where they're going to contend for years to come, but it's ultimately up to how they frame this young group and how they are able to sustain this young group and get them to become the leaders that they need them to be one of the best teams in the West and in the NHL. And we're looking at the Oilers at plus 1,000. Obviously, the Edmonton Oilers are always going to be active in the postseason to try and find ways in the McDavid and Draisaitl era to get them across the finish line. They were just so close, and I really don't see many ways that this team could improve. Maybe they get another goaltender to compete with Stuart Skinner. Maybe they get some more defensemen, try and get them on bargain deals, team-friendly deals because of McDavid and Draisaitl's huge contracts. But the Edmonton Oilers will still be there in the end of the day. I don't think they're going anywhere. The fact that, yes, they potentially could have been one of the easier paths to the finals in the West goes to show that sometimes you have to get lucky. But the Edmonton Oilers prove that they are a fantastic team whether or not they have to face a gauntlet of the Western Conference. They took the best team, the far superior team in the Stanley Cup Final, the Florida Panthers, to 7 games. And there's a lot to be said about that. And they don't really have any restricted free agents I'm worried about. Guys like Warren Fogle, yes, he's an important aspect, but you know, he's a take it or leave it kind of player. You have guys like Adam Henrique, who you might want to re-sign. He was very vital getting to that point. But overall, you still have a fantastic core. You have an exciting group of young players in Dylan Holloway Evan Bouchard and Philip Broberg, who's only going to grow. So the Edmonton Oilers are not going anywhere. But one team who I really like for their value outside that core of group of contenders is the New Jersey Devils. I think that the New Jersey Devils are a team that when all the pieces come together, if they find the right mindset, they have the players to make it deep into the Stanley Cup playoffs. I think that the major concern for the Devils was the fact that their coaching was such a big part of why they were failing. I don't think Lindy Ruff was the guy, and the fact that they fired him way too late did not help them out. But I think that Travis Green shows some nous. I think he's going to give this Devils team a sense of energy and importance again. They have the guys, and guys like Jack Hughes, Dougie Hamilton, guys like Nico Hischier is going to grow. Damon Severson on the back end. Jesper Bratt had a fantastic season a couple seasons ago. Just finding and maintaining that narrative, erasing the memories from last year, and going into this year with an open mind, allowing Travis Green to take control of this team. I think the Devils are going to be a force to be reckoned with in the East. But that should just about do it for this segment. We bid adieu to the hockey season. We thank you so much, NHL, for a fantastic season. But we are going to switch yet again, to the player profile series. We'll be going over the most dynamic QB in the league. It should give you a hint as to who it is. But we will be right back with what should be another fantastic segment for the player profiles on the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere.